political. They just lie. And they cover their and they lie. I would have been very happy to have her on. And like I said, the goal was to release both of them the same day. They just got scared. They could have put her in. I would have held her hand. We would have had a conversation. I'm not going to be antagonistic. I have no desire to turn this into a viral clip thing.
Kamala's audience squirmed as she yaks about pachyderms. Our video of the day comes to us from the former VP who made her first major speech last night since Trump took office. And it was another classic ball of verbal.
Kamala Harris appeared to rely on humor, quick comparisons, and lighthearted moments to navigate difficult questioning. For a period, that approach worked until commentators like Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld began closely examining her public performances. They pointed out moments where ideas seemed unfinished, explanations felt fragmented, and noticeable pauses surfaced during critical discussions. What started as casual mockery gradually developed into a broader conversation around communication clarity and leadership style. According to those critics, the more attention her speaking style attracted, the more visible those gaps became.
Was when Kamala Harris shows up, looks over and sees that Obama and Trump are talking to each other, and she goes like, watch this. Look at her face. Look how angry she is, dude. Look how angry she is. It's unbelievable. Melania's like, I can't believe I have to be first lady.
When laughter replaces direct responses, public discourse can quickly lose its footing. According to her critics, Harris occasionally gave that impression by talking around issues rather than addressing them head-on. Her rise contained many contradictions, from her background as a prosecutor to becoming one of the most recognized figures in American political life. While Rogan and Gutfeld took both a comedic and sharp-edged approach to the subject, their core debate centered on whether public perception of her truly matched the reality underneath.
Sit-down interview all by herself like a big girl. But when we talk about bringing down prices and making life affordable for people, what are one or two specific things she has in mind for that?
When we talk about bringing down prices and making life more affordable for people, what are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up a middle-class kid. My mother raised my sister and me. I grew up in a neighborhood of...
Be sure to subscribe if you value this kind of straightforward political commentary. Let's now take a closer look at Harris's speeches. Some critics have compared them to an instruction manual filled with numerous steps yet no clear destination. Rather than explaining policies in a straightforward, sequential way, her explanations sometimes looped back to the starting point. If listeners tracked the logic carefully, they often felt the conversation had moved in circles rather than arriving at any firm conclusion.
Now that Joe's incapacitated, Cam gets celebrated. It's a master class in kissing some Cam ass. Video of the day comes to us from liberal media hacks who can't get enough of Kamala Harris since she became the Dems presidential sharp. It's like, please kill me. Sorry, Joe, the analogy doesn't quite work because unlike Rocky, Kamala can't blame her bizarre speeches on repeated blows.
Rogan once joked that following some of Harris's answers felt like watching a software program try to debug itself. The audience would respond positively one moment, and then the conversation would drift into abstract thoughts about progress or the nature of time. Gutfeld offered his own comparison, suggesting that some of her statements resembled motivational phrases printed on coffee mugs, confident-sounding lines that carried an air of strength but rarely delivered a clear, coherent point.
An historian once called a law of history. True of every society across the ages. The adage is, only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. I know many people feel like we are entering a dark time, but for the benefit of us all.
Gutfeld further argued that Harris sometimes redirected conversations when difficult topics arose. Questions about global affairs could produce wandering responses that drifted far from the original subject, while discussions about inflation might suddenly shift into extended narratives or reflections. Critics suggested that by the time certain remarks concluded, the central message had all but disappeared. Opponents labeled it evasion, while supporters called it nuance. That sharp difference in interpretation continues to fuel the ongoing debate.
lady making fun of the guy selling her the champagne because he wasted his vote on Trump.
He asked me why I was getting the champagne, and I said, because I'm going to be toasting Madam President tonight. And I said, you do realize you wasted your vote, right? I walked out with my bottle of champagne.
She really believed it.
So, as you know, Kamala Harris.
Special attention was directed toward her involvement in addressing border-related challenges. During difficult news cycles, Gutfeld highlighted what he described as a striking contrast: calls for openness paired with limited public presence. Rogan approached the same issue differently, making his case through humor and an offbeat comparison involving a squirrel. Critics also raised questions about her visibility during key moments on the international stage.
Tulsi Gabbard took her out of the hamstrings. That's a wrap, baby.
Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. She put over 1,500 people in jail for violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever...
Have you?
I didn't.
She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place. That impacts poor people and the worst.
Even Harris's enthusiasm for electric school buses became a subject of commentary. Gutfeld joked that focusing so heavily on a single issue while broader economic pressures loomed felt like redecorating the Titanic mid-voyage. Rogan, for his part, poked fun at several of her foreign appearances, suggesting that during complex diplomatic exchanges, she occasionally came across as a substitute teacher trying to break down advanced material into the most basic terms possible.
Candidate that is the least liked vice president of all time, the least popular vice president of all time, and then use gaslighting and the full force of the media machine to turn her into the future and hope. Right. And then she's gonna be changed, even though she's a sitting vice president. And then on top of that, this idea of change when the Democrats have been in control for what, 12 of 16 years?
Right.
Which is crazy. Like, this is the change.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I view this election as a turning point, like a fork in the road.
The observations grew sharper as polling figures shifted. Gutfeld introduced the phrase leadership by proximity, implying that standing near power did not automatically mean exercising it. Rogan added his own vivid comparison, saying that the enthusiasm surrounding Harris's leadership sometimes reminded him of Loch Ness Monster sightings, widely talked about but rarely confirmed. Critics maintained that despite her polished on-screen presence, genuine depth remained elusive.
One nice thing about Kamala Harris?
I mean, she's there.
Yeah. Good job.
I mean, if this is Rocky, then it's Rocky 4, and Biden's Apollo, and Nancy Pelosi's the Russian that kills him. But like Donnie Douche, he said he's in love with her, and now his sex dolls are.
Harris did display assertiveness during the presidential primary debates. However, certain commentators questioned how consistent her convictions were, given the political alliances she formed along the way. Rogan joked that some media narratives around her resembled the marketing of decaf coffee as high-octane fuel. Gutfeld also leaned into comedy, suggesting that her version of the famous Midas touch appeared to operate in reverse. For both men, every response branded as strategic nuance simply gave them fresh material to work with.
10 seconds ago, like literally, like a day ago.
Yep.
And now it's like the country's rallying around.
I know.
Like,
yeah.
What? I don't know. I don't even.
Yeah, we're so easily manipulated, and they're all doing it in lockstep. Yeah, no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. She polled as the least popular vice president of all time.
Yeah.
She is. I had dinner with a friend of mine recently who actually knows her. He says.
Eventually, the subject of her prosecutorial record was revisited. Rogan surfaced specific details from that history without exaggeration, while Gutfeld reached for a more theatrical comparison, likening a cheerful school bus moment amid difficult economic conditions to throwing a pizza party in the middle of a famine. Critics argued that the tough-on-crime policies tied to her earlier career often clashed with the reform-oriented image she regularly projected in later years.
Get together like, hey, are you trying to get me to hate superhero movies? You trying to show me your real weird personalities and get me to hate superhero movies?
Kamala forever.
That's better.
Why are you doing that? If I was running the Avengers, I'd be like, hey guys, cut this shit. Do you think one person is going to vote for Kamala Harris because they saw that Iron Man wants them to vote for Kamala Harris?
Harris had entered public life carrying enormous expectations. Many viewed her as both a historic figure and a symbol of a new generation of political leadership. Over time, however, the conversation shifted toward whether her personal brand had outgrown her measurable achievements. Rogan described it as a textbook case of political overpromotion, where the narrative expanded far faster than the actual record. Gutfeld joked that some of her later appearances felt like a brief cameo in a comedy sketch, familiar lines delivered with confidence but missing any real emotional resonance.
The Democrat candidate for president of the United States. I'll give you a second to come to. The border czar who couldn't find our southern border on a map of Texas now wants to be America's commander-in-chief. Kamala couldn't lead a campfire sing-along, let alone the country's armed forces. But does that matter? Not to the media. Now, they would like this framed as a team sport battle, left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. But in reality, it's the media narrative.
As the commentary continued, the tone became increasingly pointed. Satire tends to follow closely when political messaging begins to overshadow practical action. Both Rogan and Gutfeld leaned into that pattern, using humor to spotlight what they perceived as a growing disconnect between policy substance and campaign rhetoric.
That I could do it, and I even offered to do it late that night. So the night that Trump came on, I'm like, what if we do her, like when she's done in Texas, if she came here? But no one ever committed to doing it. This is like really important because they keep pretending that I lied or I did this or I did that. They never committed to doing it. We went through, I've got a whole, we have all the receipts, by the way. Of course. I have a whole list of conversations.
Critics viewed that scrutiny as a form of accountability. Supporters saw it as relentless and unfair pressure. Either way, the debate continued to grow in intensity. Rogan ultimately distilled his perspective into a single concise observation: strong stage lighting cannot rescue a weak story. Presentations that lack real substance will eventually start to resemble performances.